The ground truly felt like it was shifting beneath everyone's feet when news broke about what had just happened inside the Vatican. It wasn't just a headline. It was the kind of decision that changes everything, not only for Catholics but for anyone who cares about what the world's oldest church decides to stand for. While millions of Catholics woke up stunned, confused, or even angry, many others, even outside the Catholic faith, paused in disbelief at a move that was both radically compassionate and, to some, deeply troubling. What Pope Leo XIV did was not some complicated political maneuver or dry theological statement. It was a choice about life and death, about the value of a single young person who feels completely lost, about what it means to actually follow the teachings that so many have spent lifetimes debating but so rarely living out in such a raw, public way. There was no fanfare, no speech in the square, no Vatican press release, just a plain one-page decree signed by the Pope, which has now sent shockwaves right through the heart of the Church and the world beyond. In it, Pope Leo ordered that a wing of the Apostolic Palace, the very residence of popes, a place filled with art, treasures, history, and secrets, would be turned into a temporary home, a real sanctuary, not for refugees or dissidents, but for teenagers from any part of the world who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. He called it the House of Mary, Star of the Sea. The decree made it clear this place would not be about judgment or punishment. Instead, it would offer gentle companionship, professional mental health care, and spiritual support for as long as these young people needed, regardless of their faith, background, or anything else. All they had to do was arrive. The Vatican would pay for their travel, give them a place to live, and surround them with some of the world's best counselors and doctors, all free of charge. The audacity of this decision is almost impossible to exaggerate. The Vatican is not just a church, it's a country with its own rules, police, and security. The Apostolic Palace is the ultimate symbol of exclusivity and power. Normally, even world leaders wait months to get an audience in its halls. Now, teenagers in their darkest hour would be welcomed with open arms. Pope Leo was taking the symbol of ultimate power and making it a refuge for those who feel powerless, those who might have nowhere else to go. But this decision was about more than just opening a building. It was about challenging what that building, and what the Church itself, is supposed to stand for. With his signature, the Pope was saying that the Church's highest calling is not to protect its own image, or its rules, or even its power. The first duty is to run toward those who are hurting most, no matter what that means for tradition or protocol. It was a statement that the life of a single suffering teenager means more than canon law, more than reputation, more than the approval of the Cardinals. And as soon as the news leaked, those Cardinals were furious. The fallout began. Almost instantly, the phones inside Vatican offices rang with calls from angry bishops and high-ranking clergy. 6 of the most powerful and conservative cardinals in Rome, men who had spent their lives protecting the old order, requested an emergency meeting with Pope Leo. They were refused. Instead, Leo sent them a handwritten note, short, direct, and, according to insiders, infuriating to receive. One cardinal was so angry he was described as nearly unable to speak. Another, usually calm, told colleagues he believed the Pope had truly lost his mind. These are not just career men. They see themselves as the guardians of Catholic identity and the last defense against what they see as dangerous change. In their view, what Pope Leo has done isn't just an error, it's a betrayal, a reckless act of weakness that puts everything they believe in at risk. One cardinal, a respected legal expert, said the Vatican would now be seen as nothing more than a social work agency, opening the door to scandal and chaos. Another, responsible for much of the Church's money, worried aloud, who will pay for this? Who will protect us if something goes wrong? Has the Pope forgotten our duty to preserve the dignity and moral authority of the Church? For these cardinals, the idea of turning the most secure and exclusive part of the Vatican into a shelter for mentally distressed youth seemed less like mercy and more like madness. They said it threatened the very idea of what the Church was supposed to be. And at the center of it all, Pope Leo remained unshaken, convinced that the first priority must always be the life and dignity of the person in front of him, not the comfort or status of those in power. But outside the halls of power, the reaction was completely different. Within hours, the news exploded on social media. Hashtags like Pope of Mercy started trending worldwide. Parents who had watched their children battle depression posted their gratitude. A mother from Ohio wrote that she was not even Catholic, but for the first time felt that someone in Rome saw her son as a real person, not just a problem. A young man from the Philippines tweeted that he had always felt invisible in church because of his mental health, but today the Pope had given him a home. Mental health organizations, which for decades have struggled against silence and stigma, called the Pope's move breathtakingly courageous and a game-changer for the way faith communities handle mental illness. They saw a church leader finally saying out loud what so many are too afraid to admit: mental illness is not a sin, not a sign of failure, but a deep human pain that demands love, not shame or punishment. They watched as the most powerful religious institution in the world was willing to put its money and reputation at risk for the sake of those society often overlooks. While the cardinals in Rome talked about legal risks, reputation and order, Pope Leo's decree was being welcomed by people who have long felt left out of the church's embrace. They saw a leader willing to tear down the walls that had kept so many locked out. Some priests and nuns who work in hospitals, poor neighborhoods and schools wrote that for the first time. They felt like Rome actually understood what their lives were like. For years they had felt trapped between impossible rules and the raw realities of suffering people. Now, they said, there was hope, a sense that the church could truly be a place where the wounded and desperate find comfort instead of judgment. Inside the Vatican, the tension only grew. Some longtime observers called this the most dangerous moment for the church since the Second Vatican Council. Whispers of a possible schism, an open break in the church, spread through the corridors. The most conservative cardinals were already organizing a coalition to resist Pope Leo. They were drafting letters, making calls, gathering support from bishops around the world, trying to save the church from what they saw as a rogue pontiff. For them, Leo's move was not just misguided. It was an existential threat, a direct challenge to centuries of tradition, and an attack on the foundations they had dedicated their lives to defend. But Pope Leo kept moving forward. He didn't call a press conference or offer complicated explanations. Instead, on the evening after the decree went public, he was seen alone, walking barefoot through St. Peter's Square in the rain, dressed not as the Pope but as an ordinary parish priest. No red shoes, no formal white cassock, just plain black, head bowed, making his way slowly to the great bronze doors of the basilica. He stood there for a long time, hand on the cold metal, simply listening. A young Swiss guard later told his captain the Pope didn't appear to be praying, he was just listening. And when he finally spoke to the guard, he only said, "This is where we start over." That gesture, those bare feet, meant everything. In that moment, the Pope was making clear that this wasn't about politics, publicity, or even religion as usual. It was something much deeper, a sign that, before the church could welcome the wounded, it needed to strip away its pride and comfort and feel for itself the pain and coldness that so many young people are facing alone. The divide now runs right through the heart of the Catholic world. On one side are those who see this act as an unforgivable breach of order and protocol, something that threatens the very identity of the church. On the other side are those who see it as a long overdue return to what the gospel was always about: radical, unconditional love, especially for the most broken and forgotten. A priest from Chicago wrote that, for the first time, he felt the Pope had his back, putting the real needs of real people before abstract rules and risking everything to do the right thing. And what does this mean for you, wherever you are, whatever you believe? It means that one of the world's most powerful and influential institutions is being tested in public, forced to answer the question, is the church going to be a fortress to keep the world out, or a hospital to bring the wounded in? It means the old ways, cautious, quiet, safe, are gone, replaced by something more raw, unpredictable, and maybe, in the end, more honest. It's not just a church story. It's a story about what it means to be human, about whether we choose comfort over compassion, rules over love, or whether we dare to start over, even when it costs everything. When asked why he did it, why he would risk so much, why he would provoke so much anger, Pope Leo did not give a long speech. He simply said, when a house is on fire, you don't ask for the credentials of those inside, you just run in. Our house is on fire, the house of our youth. And we have been standing outside, arguing about the curtains,